pretty cool. Thank you very much. Brian, I think this might be our last one. Sorry to everybody else who's on the list. We'll see if Brian doesn't take the whole time. Is Brian here? Brian, come on up. We run the full 5 minutes. This will be our last one. If not, we'll try to squeeze one more in. Thanks.
How many more do you have?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. All right.
Popular than expected.
I'm not going to be quick enough to get them all in. Sorry. How many of you are amateur radio operators? Good couple. How many of you have no idea what I'm talking about? Okay. Well, whether you're raising your hand or not, this is mostly for you. My call's K5BPC, and somehow I got wrangled into being the president of my radio club because I knew something about computers. I don't know how that happened. I show up within a couple weeks of being there. I've got them spending thousands of dollars on new computers in a place that doesn't want to spend any money. Next thing you know, I'm the president. But, for those of you that don't know what it is, I'm sure you've heard of Katrina, that horrible disaster where the hurricane basically wiped out Katrina, and there was no communications, there was no infrastructure, everything was more or less wiped out. The original news reports after Katrina said everything was fine. They said that the storm missed Katrina. And the reason that happened is because the infrastructure that the folks that used to gather their news was completely knocked out. They couldn't communicate, they didn't know what was happening. The first successful communication out of that area was amateur radio operators. When 9/11 happened in New York, most of the communication infrastructure was completely overwhelmed. Cell towers, they might have been working, but they weren't doing anybody any good because they were so flooded with calls that emergency traffic wasn't happening. So again, amateur radio operators step in and help local officials, whether it be the police, the fire, the EMTs, communicate with each other. Now, government agencies typically have their own radio systems, but sometimes those systems get knocked out. We're very good at making our systems work even when nothing else is working. Almost everything we use is designed to work off of 12 volts, so in a real pinch you can run your repeater off a car battery and a tank of gas as long as you need to. If you don't know anything about it, check it out. It's a really cool hobby, and it ties in a lot of different technologies. It used to be where if you had emergency communications, all you had was voice nets. We'd call up a net, everybody would log on. I don't have much time. Everybody would log on to the net, check in, and pass emergency traffic. They're trying to move where most of the emergency nets these days, there's still voice for command and control, but we're trying to move the important data and bulk data over digital modes. So you have your laptop, and in the case of West Pennsylvania Aries, we use a piece of software called FL Digi and FL Message. And with these digital programs, which were written for Linux, run on Linux very well, ported to Windows, which makes it wonderfully cross-platform because not everybody has a Linux box. You go to an emergency communication center, you might not have that, but we're all using the same program regardless of platform, and we can send messages digitally across the airwaves with, depending on the mode, with error checking, so you're making sure the message gets there correctly, gets there the first time. When I lived in North Texas, we had 20 tornadoes touch down on the same day. We have a National Weather Service net where real-time tactical communications, Weather Service is actually on the net with us. They can't see a tornado. The only way you know there's a tornado is because you have a trained spotter who sees it, knows what it looks like, and reports that to the Weather Service. With that many tornadoes touching down, the information that the amateur radio groups were able to give to the Weather Service, there were no deaths because everybody had a warning. Everybody knew what areas to get out of. The number of lives you can touch is phenomenal with amateur radio, and when you bring some open source software into that stack to allow you to do things like digitally send hundreds of names or send what the hospitals need, it empowers you to do what you need to do to help people, touch people's lives, and when there's not an emergency, have a lot of fun doing it.
Brian. Thank you all.